I have the honor of telling you. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy. It's such a beautiful event. I'm really happy to be here. And I'm very happy, finally, after all these voices, to bring some female voices and narratives to the table. As we have seen a lot of black males, but no women. I decided today to read something that it's been a long, long time since I read this episode. But as we have this picture on the back, keep Britain white, and as we are talking about citizenship, I decided to read an episode that I read here, I wrote here in Plantation Memories on space politics, called Where Do You Come From? And it's the narrative of a black female woman, a black female Afro-German, who speaks about the questions that we have been talking today. Where do you come from? People always ask me, where do I come from? Where do you come from? And that was the thing. They asked me again and again and again since I was a child, just like that. They see you and the first thing that crosses their mind is to check, where is she from? They just walk in your direction and ask without even knowing you. It doesn't matter where you are at, in a bus, at a party, on the street, at dinner, or even at the supermarket. It just doesn't matter. They look at you and they just ask. These are the words of Alicia, an Afro-German woman. Since very early, white people living around her used to confront her with questions concerning her body and her national origins, reminding her that she cannot be German because she's black. This constant questioning about where does she come from was and is not only an exercise of curiosity or of interest, but also an exercise to confirm dominant fantasies around race and territoriality. Alicia is asked in the first place because she's categorized as a race which does not belong. The question contains the colonial fantasy that German means white and black means friend, stranger, Ausländer, foreigner. It is a construction in which race is imagined within specific national boundaries and nationality in terms of race. Both blackness and Germanness are reproduced here as two contradictory categories which mutually exclude each other. One is black or German, not black and German. The and is replaced by the or, making blackness incompatible with Germanness. It is precisely this incompatibility between race and nationality which define new forms of racism. While old forms of racism appealed for biological races and the idea of superiority versus inferiority, the new forms of racism speak instead of cultural difference and its incompatibility with the national culture. We spoke about that today in the morning. Racism has therefore changed its vocabulary. We moved from the concept of biology to the concept of culture, and from the idea of hierarchies to the idea of differences. Within contemporary racism, there is no place for difference. Those who are different remain perpetually incompatible with a nation. They can actually never belong. They are irreconcilable Ausländer, strangers, foreigners. Where do you come from? Why are you here? And when do you intend to go back? These questions embody exactly this fantasy of incompatibility. We have nothing against them, but those who are different have their own countries in which to live, and therefore they should return. At first sight, it seems like an inoffensive and even naive thought. The question, however, exceeds in aggression because it unveils the white subject's reluctance to accept that we do not have our countries in which to live, but rather that we are living in our country. I cannot avoid remembering how the street where I grew up was called. I grew up in Lisbon, Portugal, and the name of my street was called João de Barros. as soon as we moved in, became known as the Street of the Monkeys, Rua dos Macacos, Street of the Apes or the Monkeys, sometimes also called República das Bananas, an imaginary nation inhabited by monkeys and congested with bananas. In the eyes of whites, we, the blacks, were the monkeys who have recently arrived from the former colonized Africa. We were from Angola, from Mozambique, from Cabo Verde, from Guinea-Bissau, my family from São Tomé e Príncipe. We were from East Timor, Roma and Sinti. The need to imagine our street as an illusory separated country reveals this incompatibility between blackness and Portugueseness. They wanted indeed to imagine us living in another country, not there with them. On the other end, the grotesque fantasy of classifying us as monkeys reveals the need to assert our position not only as an outsider, but also as inferior outside humanity. Twice, doubly excluded, doubly placed as other. And you know, says Alicia, and if I answer that I say that I'm German, they look at me confused, you know. They stop for a moment like thinking, German? Or they just start laughing, as if I misunderstood the question or gave the wrong answer. And they go and say, no, but you cannot be German. You don't look German. And start pointing to the skin. You don't look German. Where are you from? Or where are your parents from? Being looked at and asked are forms of control which embody power. Alicia is looked at, raised in the field of vision, and asked because she is expected to justify her presence in the white territory. Those who ask exercise a power relation that defines Alicia's presence as friend, as a stranger. Is there a bird now? And the territory as theirs, drawing a clear boundary between you, the racial other, who is being asked and has to explain, and we, the whites, who ask and control. This power asymmetry reminds me of a old and painful slave-master relationship. Alicia is being asked and not asking, because it is the slave who replies and the master who controls. I have no intention of asking nobody where they come from, says Alicia. She has no urge to control. The expectation that racial others tell their origins and expose their biographies reveals exactly this colonial dialectic and the very important question, which is the primal scene. While the white subject is occupied with the question, what do I see? The black subject is again forced to deal with the question, what do they see? And then they go and say, no, you really cannot be German, come on. And keep pointing at the skin. Where are your parents from? In this moment of surprise and shock, Alicia tries to find some reason within unreason. But instead she receives some more unreasonable answers. She reveals the unreason of racism described by Fanon. I was hated, despised, detested, not by a neighbor across the street, but by an entire race. I was up against something unreasoned. The psychoanalysts say nothing is more traumatizing for the young child than his encounter with what is rational. Well, I would personally say that for those whose only weapon is reason, there is nothing more neurotic than the contact with the unreason of racism. Alicia cannot apply reasonable meaning neither for the question, nor for the answers of disbelief. She tries to explain again and again that she's German, but they keep asking where is she really from. Alicia has to realize she's caught in an act of colonization. The conflict here resides not in the answer she gives, but rather in the joyful act of placing her as other again and again, and in the joyful act of invading her body with questions and occupying it. That's the colonial act. She tries to rationalize and explain an unreasonable world, but within racism, as Fanon rights, no agreement is possible at the level of reason. I do not have the story that I look like, says Alicia, and I can explain it as many times as I want. They will always let me know that the story I tell is not the story that they want to hear. I feel sometimes that I don't have any story at all, because my story, the Afro-German story, is not welcome. They do not want to hear it. Alicia may experience this contradiction as a painful inner splitting, as it seems one can only exist through the alienated image of oneself. What else could this be for me, asks Fanon, but an amputation, an exclusion, excision, hemorrhage that spattered my whole body with black blood. One uses the language of trauma to speak of everyday racism, indicating the painful bodily impact and loss characteristic of a traumatic collapse. Because within racism, one is like surgically removed and violently separated of whatever identity one might really have. I felt blades open within me, and I could no longer laugh. Fanon remarks, there is indeed nothing to laugh about, as one is being overdetermined from the outside by fantasies one sees, but one does not recognize as being oneself. I know they want to hear an exotic story. I am aware of it, especially men. They want to hear an exotic story. They want to hear that I come from somewhere in Africa or in Brazil or whatever. Here Alicia has another component, race and voyeurism. People come to ask where she is from because they also have pleasure through the exhibition of otherness. They are not interested in hearing that Alicia is German just like them, but rather they want to hear a very exotic story where their colonial fantasies and the remote other are revived. Alicia is expected to provoke pleasure. She's undressed, and patiently question after question, an audience undresses her on the search of that paradise. Okay, what about your parents? Where are they from? They keep asking until a fabulous exotic story is told. This is what has been called a modern primitivism. Primitivism in the sense that it constructs the black subject as the primitive, as the one who is closer to nature and who possesses what whites have lost. Sometimes people call this positive racism, but what a stupidity to call racism positive. Stupidity indeed, as exclusion, isolation, and racial exposure can never be positive. These projections that I'm describing here come to form what we call the primarily envy, where there is simultaneously a wish to possess certain of the desired attributes of the other, but at the same time, the other must be destroyed and attacked, because he or she represents something perceived as lacking. Alicia becomes both an object of desire that must at the same time be attacked and destroyed. She seems to be desired, but her position as an object of desire cannot be dissociated from the envy involved. People ask because they want to see the exotic, but if she doesn't answer, something else happens. At any moment, she can be transformed from the fascinating black woman into the humiliating N-word, from the exotic into the Scheisse Ausländerin, from good into bad, and from sweet into bitter, according to the fears and desires of the audience. Thank you very much.